Xenoblade Chronicles has gone from a niche RPG that barely got released in the States to one of Nintendo's more popular series, with several sequels and spin-offs being released in around a 10-year window. I've noticed a lot of Nintendo fans, mostly Nintendo tubers, being pretty mixed on the series for whatever reason, but for me, I love Xenoblade. I've cleared all the games, and I got my copy of 3 on pre-order. With the third game releasing soon, I thought it would be fitting to go over the series. I'll be talking about the history of Monolith Soft, looking at each game in the series, and putting together the pieces of what I think will happen in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. There might be some visual spoilers here because I am playing a few of these games in the post-game mode, but I'll try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. There's a lot to talk about here, so we'll get right into it. Before we set forth on this epic journey, it would be helpful if you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell as well for notifications on future videos. With that out of the way, let's begin. I'm really feeling it. I also want to give a shout out to my friends over at Meepon. If you're interested in anime, Japanese culture, or even working in the anime or gaming industry, give them a follow. I'll leave a link in the description and put a card up as well. Monolith Soft is a name that many are familiar with these days, thanks to how huge the Xenoblade series has gotten, and the fact they are owned by Nintendo. They actually have quite an interesting history that I covered way back in a video from 2017. Look at that handsome bastard. If you don't feel like watching that bit of cringe from way back when, let me fill you in again. Monolith Soft started after Tetsuya Takahashi left Squaresoft after the release of Xenogears on the PlayStation 1. Xenogears actually started as a script for a Final Fantasy title, but Square wisely decided that it was too dark for a Final Fantasy game, but thought it was good enough to be its own title. Xenogears was released in 1998 and was a critical and commercial success. While considered to be a solid game, it shows its production scars with a second disc that is basically one giant cutscene with a bit of good old PlayStation 1 nudity. I've cranked my hog to some desperate stuff before, but this is too degenerate, even for me. Gears had a difficult development process, with an inexperienced team, using new technology, a strict deadline, and a localization effort done by one dude. Rough development is a staple when it comes to the Xeno meta series. Despite being a modest hit, Takahashi left Square to start Monolith Soft with Namco founder Masaya Nakamura. Under Namco, Monolith would make a new series carrying the Xeno label, Xenosaga. Plans for the series were big. It was basically going to be Star Wars plus anime, which spells awesome. While the first game in the series was a critical and commercial success, the second game changed the art and gameplay and suffered weaker sales. The big plans for the Xenosaga series were cut due to Episode 2's poor sales and Bandai and Namco fusing together to make Bandai Namco, which also screwed over other titles at the time such as Pac-Man World 3. Pour one out for Pac-Man.
Pac-Man thirsty, Pac-Man drink strong. Rawr.
Thankfully, Monolith was able to end the series on a high note with Xenosaga Episode 3, which wrapped up the story and fixed the gameplay. There was also a remake of sorts of Xenosaga 1 and 2 on the DS in Japan, but that's where the Xenosaga ended, other than the odd cameo of Cosmos here and there. Supposedly, Tekken series producer Katsuhiro Harada is a huge Xenosaga fan and pushed for a remake of the Xenosaga, but Namco decided to be a bunch of killjoys and said no.
Stop and sit the head down! And don't ask me for shit.
I also can't do a recap of Monolith Soft and not mention some of their other titles like Namco Cross Capcom and Soma Ringer, both of which I really want to play but neither got exported. And of course there's the Baten Kaitos duology on the GameCube, which I've played and is pretty solid. I'm really hoping that the Baten Kaitos games get ported because they're so weird I want other people to experience them. After a bit of legal wrangling, Nintendo ended up buying a majority share of Monolith Soft and became a second party to Nintendo. Monolith helped out with major titles such as Super Smash Bros. Brawl, but they wanted something more. Monolith set out to make a game that was so epic in every sense of the word, a game that would become legendary, and that game was Disaster Day of Crisis.
Their name is Surge.
Surge. Never heard of him.
And Xenoblade Chronicles. So, there's your history lesson on Monolith Soft, and I hope you enjoyed that. To me, they have a very interesting history, but ultimately, I'm very happy that Nintendo owns Monolith Soft these days. I would hate to see their talent being put to waste on games, like those random anime fighters Bandai Namco likes to publish, but no one plays after a month. But hey, we avoided that future, so that's good. But I know why you're really here. You want me to talk about all the Xenoblade games, and that's something I want to do. So I have all the Xenoblade games here, and well, let's just take a look at all of them, starting with the first game in the series. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 was originally released in Japan in 2010 and Europe in 2011. Despite the game being done and having a full English translation ready to go, Nintendo of America wasn't interested in publishing the game stateside. It took the efforts of Operation Rainfall to bring the game to the States, along with other late-release Wii RPGs, Pandora's Tower and The Last Story. With a ton of fan support, Operation Rainfall was a rousing success. While XC picked up the tab for the latter two, Nintendo published Xenoblade themselves. Only to GameStop. Man, GameStop sucked. It was cool back then when I was younger, and getting dirt cheap Wii and GameCube games was pretty sick, but man, did they give you crap for selling games to them. Oh, and they did that thing where they crack open new copies of a game and sell it as used for insane prices. Real classy there, jerks. I remember one GameStop in the mall in Albuquerque having a copy of Xenoblade Chronicles for about $100 back in 2014. When I came back from my study abroad in Japan in summer of 2015, that same copy of Xenoblade was still there. I managed to play the Wii version thanks to a friend who was kind enough to let us play his Wii U in the common area in the dorm I was staying at in Kyoto, and eventually I got my own copy for the Wii later in 2015, thanks to Amazon selling region-free copies of it for about $40, and that worked on the Wii U. Xenoblade also got a re-release on the 3DS, which only worked on the new models of 3DS, which aren't exactly new these days. I don't own the 3DS version of Xenoblade, but I'm sure it's fine. While I have my Wii version, I largely abandoned it for the remake on the Switch, Definitive Edition. It was released in 2020 and is the way to play Xenoblade Chronicles 1 these days. It looks better, has some massive quality of life improvements, and has the ability to be played while you're pooping. Always a positive. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is definitely a unique game from Nintendo. Unlike other Nintendo titles where plot is usually passed out drunk in the back seat while gameplay drives the car, and the art style picks the music, the plot is heavily integral to Xenoblade. The plot goes a little like this. Two titans collide in battle, and a war broke out between the Homs, which I'm gonna call humans just to piss off Xenoblade fans, and the Mechon, which are robots. The main hero, Shulk Hogan, is doing research on the Red Blade known as the Monado when his colony is attacked by the Mechon. A tragedy happens, and Shulk and the greatest fictional character of all time, Ryan, set off to take the fight to the Mechon. And of course, many twists and turns happen on this epic 80-hour plus adventure. One thing I have to give Xenoblade Chronicles 1 credit for is that the main party is very likable. Probably one of my favorite main parties since Final Fantasy X. Dunban is an excellent mentor who gets amazingly extra in battle. Ricky is cute and gets some funny lines. Milia has had a crap life dealt to her, but she pulls through for her country and her friends. And Charla, well, Charla sucks in gameplay, but she's fiending for some Ryan cock. By the end of the game, everybody goes through development and they all avoid those annoying cliches of the falling out or the traitor tropes. The bad guys are also really cool too, with Metalface in particular being deliciously hammy. Aiding this is the excellent voice acting. Xenoblade Chronicles 1 was localized in Europe, and they went for British voice acting.
I'm gonna put the skitties in your Alan Wickers, you plonker!
Do you know what he's saying?
And instead of incoherent cockneys, they got people who could actually act. Adam Howden as Shulk really stands out in the game's more emotional moments. Rufus Jones as Dunban also stands out for how dramatic he is. Well done, Jones and Howden, you did the Queen and Manchester United proud. With that said, some of the side characters really don't sound that good.
Where are you two heading? If you've got time, you should come back to our camp.
Juju, you are literally worse than a fire made out of racism and are as useful as a paper cup filled with gasoline and cum to put out the fire made out of racism. If you got Ian and Gar planes early on in the game, it would have made the game and the universe a better place. Xenoblade Chronicles felt like a huge breath of fresh air for the JRPG genre back in 2012. JRPGs during that generation were often criticized for being too linear, too obtuse, and being too, anime for the honkies. Then Xenoblade came along and did the opposite. The Bionis and the Mechonis are two huge worlds to explore, with areas within areas within areas. The Bionis Anus, and now that was a fun level. Some areas are a bit hard to maneuver around, and there are some particularly annoying bad guys who will harass and one-shot you, but that's easy to forgive when you see these lush and detailed environments firsthand. The combat ignores turn-based combat in favor of active time combat, which is often compared to Final Fantasy XII. The main difference is Shulk is infinitely better than come in a can van. You move around your opponents, make sure your team is buffed up, make sure the tank is drawing aggro, and then you build up enough power to unleash a chained attack and just lay waste to your opponents. It's quite a rush whenever you fell a giant beast or mech in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. As a kid, I could never get into turn-based combat, but Xenoblade's fast pace and involvement made me feel more engaged than other RPGs I played beforehand. And while I've been lavishing Xenoblade 1 with praise so far, there are some annoyances with this title that bled into other games. For one, Xenoblade has a lot going on. Between world building and combat, it can get confusing. Second, there is this enemy buff called Spike, which is one of the most annoying enemy buffs ever. All it is when you hit your enemy, they deal damage to you just for existing. It's like punching someone out cold, but you break your arm in the process. Third, there's a bit too much walking. There is a fast travel option, and you do get waypoints often, but for how big these environments are, getting a horse or a Zamboni would have been appreciated. Fourth, the side quests suck. All they are is busy work, either collecting something or killing X amount of something. And there's a lot of side quests. It's easy just to want to do all the side quests as soon as they are available, but it gets boring just running around all day doing other people's chores. And lastly, the game goes on for a bit too long. There's a good stopping point around the 60-hour mark in this game, and they could have wrapped things up there, but then the game just kept going on for another 20 hours with some extremely annoying areas and bosses to fight. Thankfully, cutting up the final boss with the Monado is very satisfying. Despite my gripes with Xenoblade Chronicles 1, the good far outweighs the bad here. Xenoblade Chronicles is an epic in every sense of the word. It deserves the praise it gets and more, and is not only one of Nintendo's best games, but one of the best games, period. So there's my look at Xenoblade Chronicles 1, and I have to say this game is still fantastic. I haven't played it in a hot minute, but playing again on the Switch made me realize that, damn, this game is truly something special, and a game that is definitely worthy of all the praise that it gets. And I'm also happy that this game has a larger fan base these days, thanks to it being on the Switch, thanks to the 3DS port, thanks to Shulk being in Smash Bros, and thanks to it not being only sold at GameStop. If it was only being sold at GameStop these days, it'd probably be an NFT because GameStop is, well, kinda desperate for money. Was Xenoblade 1's sleeper success, it'd be natural that we would get more games in the Xenoblade series, and we would get a new title on the Wii U. Xenoblade Chronicles X was announced for the Wii U in 2013, just called, well, X. It eventually became a Xenoblade title as Xenoblade Chronicles X. Not a sequel to the first title, but a thematic sequel of sorts. Gone is the planet Bionis, now we're on the hostile and alien world known as Mira. An alien war has devastated the Earth, and the remaining humans fled the Earth to the planet Mira, where they must work together to survive. And much like the first game, things aren't what they seem. X released in 2015 to a polarizing reception from fans. While critically it did well, and it sold as well as any late-release Wii U title could, players of the first title are split. Some like the changes to the setting and the gameplay, others think that it barely resembles the Xenoblade game at all. So why is that? Well, let's hop in the scale and fly right in. As mentioned before, X is all about the human race surviving on Mira. It's a simple setup that works for the kind of game X is. It's all about the world, not so much the characters. That's why in this game you can make an original character. See that? That's what Z-Man will look like in the future. Your character, named Rook, wakes up from a stasis pod to be greeted by the mysterious Babe Elma, voiced by Kaylin Glass, and gets recruited into Blade, the force that is tasked to explore Mira and keep the man-made city of New LA safe from harm. And with that, we are off to explore this extremely dense but hostile world known as Mira. It's still safer than a walk down Zuni in Albuquerque. To be blunt, the plot in X is mid at best. It's a basic setup, but that doesn't mean there aren't interesting things to see here. As you explore Mira and do missions, more alien life forms move into New LA, bringing their own culture and customs to the human race. You do learn more about what happened to the human race in between the destruction of Earth and when Rook awakened. Plus, the planet itself has a lot of character. There's 5 major biomes, each with their own climate, flora, and fauna. You can just hang out somewhere and watch how life on the planet is, in between getting ambushed and getting one-shot by some horrible abomination that is. On the flip side, there aren't a lot of strong characters in this game. I do think Elmo's cool, and some of the other recruitable blades you can get are pretty interesting, but for the most part, a lot of the characters are just kind of forgettable. Also, there are a lot of really cool and really unique concepts that are introduced in X, but have very poor payoffs. You'll end the game with more questions than you did at the start of the game. Side quests are still a weak point, but not quite as annoying as 1. Yes, there is a ton of busy work, but it's stuff that would be happening naturally by just playing the game. There's more developmental stories with characters in New LA that give the game some character, which is nice. I thought of the side quests and stories as little challenges I could do while cruising around naturally in a mech, blasting some J-pop. And it goes without saying, the music slaps. It's composed by Hiroyuki Sawano. And every song on the OST is an absolute knee slapper, even the cheesy rap segments. Actually, especially the cheesy rap segments. Still, just running around the planet of Mira is quite fun. Despite only having 5 major areas plus the hub town, each area is as dense as any area from one. And from the word go, you can go anywhere on the planet until a horrible beast eliminates you. While traversing on foot is possible, it's best to wait until you get your skill, the special mechs that can cruise around the planet and eventually fly around in. But I do agree with the biggest criticism of this game is that the beginning of this game is quite slow. The first 3 chapters of X are just info dumps, and then you do a bunch of running around until you can get your mech. And at that point, that's when the game really opens up. So that's my advice if you get X, stay with it. It's definitely worth the payoff. As for the gameplay, it's as deep as ever. This time you get a 4 party member system which only expands your strategies, and you can obtain the giant robots called scales which only adds more power to your arsenal. Sometimes you need mechs to take out huge bad guys, or you need to get on foot to traverse the many caves and hidden passages in Mira. And unlike the first title, your characters reach their max level at 60, forcing you to change your loadouts and strategies in order to take out the horrible abominations that exist in Mira. It's very tempting to max out all the character classes and your bonus characters just to find that perfect strategy for you. There's a lot of customization and variabilities you have here in X, and it's definitely the strongest point of this game. While I think for Xenoblade fans, X was a bit of a mixed bag. Everybody agrees the graphics, presentation, and gameplay are up to snuff, but the plot and setting are seriously lacking. But to me personally, this checks off everything I wanted from an RPG. You have customization, sci-fi which I love, a killer soundtrack, and gameplay that was endlessly fun, and giant robots. You know who digs giant robots? Chicks do. That's why Xenoblade Chronicles X is my favorite game in the Xenoblade series, and one of my personal favorite games ever. I really do mean that. Xenoblade Chronicles X is seriously one of my favorite games of all time, better than the first game, and it just feels like Xenoblade Chronicles X was a title that was just made for me. It hits everything I like in a video game. You have sci-fi, you have giant robots, you have rapping in the battle theme, you have customization, you have blue-haired anime waifus. Everything you could want in a game and more. It's kind of like the enigma of Amigara Fault. This game was just made for me. I really do feel like if you could find a Wii U these days, Xenoblade Chronicles X is worth it, but again, good luck finding a copy these days. Still holding out for the Switch port. Speaking of the Nintendo Switch, we would get the next game in the Xenoblade series very soon after Xenoblade Chronicles X.
俺は君のために楽園に行く。
Xenoblade Chronicles 2 was announced at the same time as the Switch, for release in December 2017. Quite the fast turnaround time when X was only released 2 years prior, and some of Monolith's staff working on Breath of the Wild. 2 was more of a direct sequel to 1, which was a bit of a disappointment to me, considering my love of X and how many cliffhangers that title had. Regardless, I was hype. I got the collector's set, I got the controller that got the drift, and set forth on another monolithic epic. I reviewed this title way back when it was new, and I was pretty positive on it, but it's been about 5 years since, so let's see how my opinions have changed on this title. Let's dive right in and take a look. 2 takes place in the land of All Rest, where people live on giants among the clouds. You play as a young man named Rex, voiced by Al Weaver, as he is recruited to help find a special item known as the Aegis. Rex gets backstabbed and is brought back to life by a very attractive woman known as Pyra, voiced by Sky Bennett. She brings Rex back to life as they set forth on a quest to find a land called Elysium.
Now place your hand on my chest.
Girl, put your hand down my pants, and I'll bet you'll feel nuts. Yes, I'm Siskel, yes, I'm Ebert, and I'm giving 2 thumbs up. Needless to say, things get complicated from there. Now, 2 has become a very polarizing game over the years, even more so than X. There are some people who really love 2, and there are other people who absolutely hate the title. So I'll break it down from the good, to the bad, to the mixed. For the good, well, just look at it. Xenoblade games have always pushed the hardware, and 2 is no exception. The environments are as huge and as gorgeous as ever. Plus they are designed in a way that have plenty to see, but always guide the player on the right path to continue the story. Plus the world taking place in the sky is so badass. It reminds me of one of my favorite games ever, Skies of Arcadia, and that's a plus. Also, the characters show far more expression in this game. I know not everybody was on board for the anime look, but it does mean people are far more emotive than in 1 or X. The combat is as deep and as satisfying as ever, especially when you chain a grip of attacks together and do absurd damage. Finally, the Aegis are great characters. Pyra and Mithra are very likable and go through a good amount of character development by endgame, and their interactions with Rex are cute. Rex gets 2 big titty waifus and I hope he gets smothered every night. And the main bad guys, Torna, are cool as hell. They are all designed by Tetsuya Nomura, so that means Xenoblade 2 will have some connection with Kingdom Hearts. In particular, the main bad guy Malos, voiced by David Menken, has a really cool story and is a perfect rival to Pyra and Mithra. His partner Jin, voiced by John Schwab, is also badass and always gives you a run for your money whenever you fight him. Jin is so cool they made a whole spin-off for him. For the bad, the big one for me is the UI. It is absolutely terrible. You're constantly fiddling around with the menu, doing merc missions, checking your affinity trees, and swapping out blades all the time. Often in the world you'll see some treasures or hidden paths that require some field skills to get past, which is fine, but you have to keep going through and editing your whole team just through the field skills, then swap back to whatever your team was. Also, the map is terrible. Unlike the 3D map from 1 or the guiding ball from X, you get this flat map where it's hard to tell where to go or what level things are on. Also, the gacha system is absolutely anus. Your weapons are these things called blades that you get from cracking open a cube and hope you get someone good. There's a ton of sick looking blades, but more than likely you'll be rolling the generic ones that no one ever uses until you farm a ton of cubes and just burn them all at once until you get a cool rare blade. And that's how I got Cosmos early on in the game. And I'm glad that Nintendo published Xenoblade Chronicles 2, because I feel like someone like Cygames or Namco or EA would have microtransaction this game to hell and back. I personally didn't have much luck with rolls. I just armed my team with whatever rare blades I got and hope for the best. And while a lot of the rare blades can look cool, some of them are just pretty weird looking. Monolith was short-staffed when they made 2, and they had guest artists make blades, which meant a lot of horny Japanese dudes making waifus. Whether they're furry, goth, rich, or Lolita, aka you're going to jail, there's plenty of jerk-off material for everybody. And while Torna is cool, the other main bad guy sucks. It's this priest dude who might as well just say I'm evil on his stupid fucking hat. This dude sucks. I legit forgot about him until I combed through the cutscenes. Your mom's biggest failure was failing to kill you as a child. Now for the mixed. To me, the plot isn't as good as 1 or X. 1 has a basic setup, tragedy hits and you're out for revenge. In X, you're on a new planet trying to survive. In 2, you're trying to reach Elysium and Torna is on your ass. That's fine. Then you meet the priest dude and the main characters are basically out of focus besides the Aegis and Rex is only there because Mithra likes twinks. I honestly checked out of the plot by the 50th hour and I just was there to fight bigger bad guys. I think the main problem with the plot is that the main party just isn't that interesting. Okay, Pyra and Mithra are cool and do drive the plot along, that's great. Morag is really cool, and who could forget the one-eyed, one-nut wonder Zeke, just is in the streets and comes in his sheets. I like them both, but neither really add anything to the story. And the rest of the party is... Tora is a Nopon who made his own blade because he has a maid fetish. While generally friendly, his voice is annoying, and he is limited gameplay-wise until endgame. He has a super broken third form of his blade, but you don't get that until the end of the game, so until then I just basically benched him for my entire playthrough. Nia also has an annoying voice, but she also has an interesting backstory, but they really don't do anything with it besides, like, yeah, that's kinda cool. We still gotta save Pyra and her massive knockers. Plus, Nia isn't even that hot. People seriously come to this chick? Then there's Rex, and jeez, this dude sucks. So much of the game is spent on him, but he barely has anything to do with the main plot besides being the driver for the Aegis. He's about as interesting as a stack of chairs in the corner of your classroom. He is the shonen hero played absolutely straight with nothing unique to him besides his trash fit that Link couldn't even make cool. He's often compared to Sora and Pit, but he's nowhere near as memorable as either. He doesn't have Sora's determinism or willingness to use lethal force, nor Pit's lovable idiocy and extremely focused mindset. Rex is just kind of there, but at the same time they put way too much focus on him on the story. What I'm trying to say is there's a reason why he got skipped over for Smash Ultimates. Also, compared to 1 and X, the English dub in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is rough, to say the least. They didn't get the veteran talent they had for 1 or X, and they didn't have really good voice direction. Supposedly, the actors weren't given much, if any, context for what was happening, and for the most part, they only had one take, which explains the poor voice acting. Thankfully, by the end of the game, the actors seem to get a fit for their characters and do sound good. even if I feel Nia and Torna are hella annoying. In general, 2 had a rough production. A lot of Monolith staff was working on Breath of the Wild, so not all hands were on deck for 2, which would explain some of the more annoying aspects of 2's design. As I said earlier, the blades were done by guest artists with little input from Monolith, leading to some contrast. With all that said, 2 isn't a bad game, far from it. I think it's good. It just had a lot to live up to when following up the excellent 1 and X. I know a lot of people got into RPGs through 2, so I understand if it's your favorite, but to me, it's a good game, but one game I left wanting more. So there's my look at Xenoblade Chronicles 2 finished, and I have to say this game is good. The good points are really good, but the low points really drag it down. I feel like 1 and X are more solid and consistent experiences overall, but 2 is still very enjoyable. It's just not as consistent as the other games in the series. But I think that's reflective of the game's rough development process. But I do understand why it's a lot of people's favorite game in the Xenoblade series, because it was an early game in the Switch's life and it did sell a lot of units at the time. Or maybe everyone's just horny for Pyrite Mithra, I don't know. I know I am. But we still have one more little game to look at here with Torna, the Golden Country. And finally, the last game in the series released so far, Torna, the Golden Country. This is a prequel expansion to Xenoblade 2 that focuses on Jin and his story, how he got into Malice's hands, and how the plot of 2 came to be, essentially. The main squad is Jin and his driver Laura, voiced by Anna Koval. Both of them are on the run and learning how to work together as a duo. They eventually team up with Mithra and her driver Adam, the Prince of Torna, voiced by Paul Thorney, as it describes their involvement in the Blade War that happened 500 years prior to the events of 2. Torna is a smaller game than others, clocking in at about 20 hours, which is nice because I have other things to do with my time. Torna goes out of its way to fix many issues people had with 2. For one, the voice acting is much better. Second, the combat is better explained and ignores the gacha stuff that blighted base 2. Third, no Rex, no Nia, and no Tora. Good stuff there. Laura is nice and has more involvement with the plot, even though at the end of the day she's just a living MacGuffin for Jin, which kinda doesn't sit well with me, but whatever. Despite Torna being a shorter game, that doesn't mean it isn't as dense as other Xenoblade games. There's still a deep combat system with a ton of options at your disposal, lots of bad guys to fight and quests to do, and maybe they indulge that a bit too much. At a certain point in Torna, in order to progress, you have to build up the community level to some of the towns, which means doing a bunch of side quests. Depending on how side quest heavy you were throughout the game, it's either a minor annoyance or a huge pain in the ass. Side quests aren't optional if I have to do them to progress the story, god damn it. But that's my only complaint about Torna. It's 2 without the fat and with a clear goal in mind. I've seen arguments about which is the best Xenoblade game, and it isn't uncommon to say that Torna is the best. At the very least, it didn't take 80 hours out of my life, which is a positive. So that's my look at the Xenoblade series finished, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I know I did, even though that was a lot of game to cover. I have to give Monolith props for making such consistent and big and enjoyable games. Each game is very well thought out and is very fun. For me, I find it hard to complete games these days because they are so long and they do get so repetitive at certain points in them. But Xenoblade Chronicles always managed to keep me hooked and see through the end, and that's really impressive because, again, almost all these games do run about 80 hours in runtime. With the past behind us, it's now time to look towards the future with Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and now we're getting to some spoiler talk and game theory. And who doesn't love game theory? That's the only reason why I can see people enjoying a Matt Pat video. So here's your warning. Spoiler warning, spoiler warning, spoiler warning. If you don't want to get spoiled for the previous Xenoblade games, go to this time in the video, or just use the chapter select in the bar on the bottom of the screen. Anyway, let's get into it. And just a heads up for this section, I don't have access to Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and I'm only going off of what I've seen in trailers and read online, so I could be totally off the mark, but hey, this is just fan theory. Anyway, let's get into it. The universe of Xenoblade was made in a science experiment gone wrong, where a scientist named Klaus ended up creating 2 worlds. The worlds of the Bionis and the Mechonis in 1, and all rest from 2. Linking the 2 universes together is Klaus, known as the Architect. He was split into 2 halves. His benevolent half formed Allrest, and the evil half formed Zanza and caused the conflict of the Homs versus the Mekon. The events of 1 and 2 happen simultaneously, so when Shulk defeats Zanza, the Architect passes on, giving the land of Alrest a parting gift for Rex and Pyra and Mithra, restoring his faith. However, in the Bionis, a mysterious figure known as the Fog King showed up and is a giant Fog King asshole. While it's not explained where it came from, my theory is that the death of Klaus caused the Fog King to show up. It's said that 3 takes place in the future of 1 and 2, so my guess is the worlds of the Bionis and Alrest fused together, and the Fog King is the result of the 2 worlds starting to merge. It's basically stated that the Queen of Kiev is Melia, and the Queen of Agnes is Nia. Imagine being so salty that you got cucked by Rex you decided to wage a war. That sounds like a song Viper the rapper would make. My theory is that corruption from the Fog King, as well as influence from the mysterious Consul, are pulling the strings and are the reasons why their heroic Melia and Nia are at war. Or maybe it's those fancy masks they are wearing. Always verify your BDSM goods before you buy, kids. Don't want to start a war over a shit gimp mask. Now, assuming the story is what happens when the worlds collide like the Power Man 5000 song from Tony Hawk 2, how would Xenoblade X play into the story? My theory is that the fusion of the Bionis and Alrest starts to form its own identity and becomes the living planet known as Mira. Mira is a messed up place. It created superfauna to erase the sentient life, but kept their information like languages and memories, which is how alien life forms living on Mira can communicate with each other, but for some reason they can't leave the planet. Mira itself feeds off knowledge, kind of like the brains from Futurama. So long story short, Fry is going to save the Xenoblade universe, which, given how insane the Xenoblade series can get, that doesn't sound outside the realm of possibility. So that's the complete history of Xenoblade Chronicles and Monolith Soft finished, and I hope you enjoyed it. This was a lot of info to go over, and I hope it got you up to speed for Xenoblade Chronicles 3. All that's left now is just to wait for the game to come out and hope I don't get spoiled, because this is like one of the few things I will actually get mad about if I'm spoiled. So please don't post any spoilers in the comments, don't be a jerk. For me, the question is, what is Monolith's next project after Xenoblade 3? I personally would like to see him take on another Nintendo franchise, like Kid Icarus, or maybe make a new Project Cross Zone game. Those are really fun. But let me know down there in the comments, what's your favorite Xenoblade game? Are you looking forward to Xenoblade Chronicles 3? Who's your Xenoblade waifu? Let me know all that in the comments. And while you're down there, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit the bell as well for notifications on future videos. Follow me on social media, Twitter, Instagram @ZMings, and with that, I will see you in the next video. Later, everybody. Take care. Stay cool.